March 3rd Finance Committee. And all right, I'm getting a message from Zoom. Teresa, can you take roll call?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Gordon, John.
Here.
Joycelyn. Here. Yummy.
Here.
Brent.
Yeah, here.
Michelle.
Here.
Ron.
Here.
Thank you.
Do we need to announce who else is on who's listening in, or is, you just have note of that?
Yeah, we do have one other board member on the line. It's Rita. Rita, are you there? Heard her earlier.
Well, see, Rita, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right.
Thank you, Rita. Cody, do you want to name the other people on the call?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So we have Diana Ryder, Ellie Garrison, Jennifer Ridley, Jim Staley, and Susan Ray for staff. We also have, I'm sorry, I didn't say board committee members. We've got Gordon Cook, Rita, Brent, Yummy, and Michelle, and Ron, if I didn't say Ron. Sorry, my list moves and changes, and Brian Gash has joined as well.
Thank you, Cody.
Okay, I assume everyone has looked at the agenda. Are there any requested changes to it? Otherwise, I'd like a motion to approve the agenda.
So move.
Second.
John.
I'll second, Michelle.
Do I need a voice approval, or do you have to take roll call?
No, it can be voice.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? And abstained? Okay, the agenda has been approved. Next item on the agenda is the minutes of the last meeting. I assume you've all had time to read those. They were posted. Teresa, I have a couple items that I just wanted to point out on page 2 under the auditor update. The word merge is used in 4 different places. I think that should be merger. And then at the bottom of the page, there's what looks to be it says, I don't know if it's I-85 or 185, but I didn't know if that was intended to be 182.
I believe that should be 182. We'll get that changed. It should be 182. It refers back to the RSMO 182-6485. I'll put the complete number on there.
Any other comments on the minutes? If there's none, I'd like a motion to approve.
So move.
Who was that?
That was Ron, I believe.
Okay.
Ron.
All right, and I'll need a second.
I have a question. This is Yummy. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think we need a motion to approve with corrections.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Oh,
Sorry.
but, yeah.
So I will back up. Ron, would you like to amend your motion to approve the minutes with the corrections, the 2 corrections that were noted?
Sure, so move.
Okay.
Michelle, second.
And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? And any abstains? Okay. The minutes will pass as corrected. All right, the next item on the agenda is the budget discussion format. I think, Steve, this is just intended to be an update of our meeting, I believe, and getting prepped for the upcoming cycle. Just, you know, I spent a few hours with Steve and Kwan last week just to have them walk me through the budget process and some of the worksheets, and just, you know, so I could get a little more up to speed. I'm still kind of absorbing things, so if I don't have a full handle on it, it's because I'm still fairly new to this. But some of the things we talked about were just in terms of understanding the I guess what I'll call the major cost components and how we end up presenting that to the board down the road, and actually as well for the committees to take this into their discussions. But one of the things we talked about was understanding what our current base cost is, and what I'll call the annualized cost that basically runs the operation. Secondly, looking at costs that are intended or planned to be eliminated. I guess a simple example, you may be at a program that's either no longer necessary, or one that's been tried and is going to be discontinued. And so those costs should come out. And third piece being, what are the new proposed costs for new programs, new staff, et cetera. And it's really just kind of understanding what the major components of those of the operations is. The other component that I have made some inquiries on, as Steve and I had some exchanges, is the capital funding, the capital budget, and separate from the current building renovation plan should be a long-term capital, I'll call it capital replacement and maintenance plan that looks out ideally over the life cycle of the assets. And the plan would be fairly detailed. It would look at all your major asset components. And an example of that would be taking each of the branches and looking at the major cost components. So you would look at things like the carpet, the HVAC systems, the roof, and maybe, if there's something else there that I don't see in those buildings, those would be part of that cost projection. So you would, if you put a new roof on this year, then assuming a life of that asset component being somewhere in the 20 to 30 year range, you would push that out over 20 years. And then you would be funding that over a time period to make sure that when you got to that point, you had adequate funds in place to cover that cost. So that's a broad brush overview of how that works. And so Steve, I don't know that that's done. I know you mentioned that Jake, correct? Would be taking a look at that. So I don't know how that will play into the current budget cycle.
Yeah, and just to, this is Steve, just to weigh in a little bit more. Yes, Gordon and I have been sharing a lot of email on this recently, and there aren't, because we have touched practically every building in the capital plan, there aren't a lot of backed up maintenance needs right now. So what the four buildings that do have ongoing maintenance needs, because they weren't either completely rebuilt or redone, are North Independence, Midwest Genealogy Center, Smithville, and Woodmeath, the main structure of Woodmeath. Although we have been maintaining those as we've been going along. The other buildings, a building like Colburn Road is about a year old, and there's not a lot of maintenance obviously to do on a one-year-old building. But what Jake's been doing is he's been collecting all of that information. He's got essentially an information management system that he's been inputting all of that information for the new buildings in, so that he can work on a long-term capital maintenance program. So we don't get to the place where we were in 2003 and 2000 to 2003, where we were tripping over carpets and things like that. So the process is going on right now. What Jake and I have done, and those of you who have been on the committee know, we've been talking about sort of a broad number. It's about a $9 million maintenance number starting in about 10 years. And where that number comes from is it's a broad, high level look, where we're looking at scope, some of the stuff Gordon was talking about, carpet, roof, air conditioning, things like that. Looking at that and its average cost per square foot, total square footage of the library system over time and inflation. And that's where we're coming up with the $9 million number. But we'll keep drilling down. But I don't think there's going to be any large capital maintenance projects. There might be one or two in the upcoming budget, but they would be focused on those four buildings that I mentioned earlier.
Any questions?
Just one just one comment. This is John. I think one of the practices that we've had for some years now, we'd asked the staff to prepare a long-range budget, which covered all possibilities of expenditure. And I think it was a 20-year budget. Is that right?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, a 20-year budget, is somewhat of an illusion, but at least it gives you a chance to take a rough look at where we're going and what we have to have in order to keep going in that direction. So I think that's guided us well, and I hope we'll continue to refer to that for items such as Gordon just mentioned. And I believe we'll be able to and have in the past. And I think it have a pretty good handle on the capital needs going forward, and a pretty good handle on the idea that we are going to have sufficient revenue to meet those needs.
John, Steve sent me a worksheet, and I sort of remember this from the last time I was on the board. This is the 25-year projection. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, that's what I was referring to.
Yeah, no, I looked at that then, and the capital piece is one component of that. I agree with you. We have to look at a long range. Totally agree. Look at that and make sure that things are not getting out of line, and that there's adequate funds to cover the costs. So that is and should be a part of the budget process. Any other comments? Okay, let's move to the next item on the agenda, which is the ACH fraud. I think everyone has the or should have had. Okay, Teresa or whoever, I need for you to, I guess how we do this. I want to share my screen so I can navigate this. So do you take yours off?
Yes, I think Cody, can you walk Gordon through that? I think there's a component for you.
Okay, so I just need to there, and there we go. All right, so can you see? All right, now I have to figure out how to get this.
Yeah, we can see it.
We can see it in the boardroom, Gordon. So
Oh, you can. Okay. All right. You have a packet, which is just the information regarding the ACH fraud. I put some information out there. I also just made some general inquiries into the banks, because the industry's changed, not just because of the frauds, but the way ACHs work. I work with Commerce, and they were nice enough to send me some of the brochures, so that's what you're seeing there. I asked Central Bank as well. I work with Central Bank on another matter. They don't have anything like this. It sounds like they're putting something together, but I'm not going to go through this in detail. But you can see that this is a big deal. It talks about the business email compromise, which is what this matter would be labeled. Email account is a personal email compromise. I will just tell you that I've been a party to that about 7 months ago. So I understand how that works, but you can see that this is a big cost. A couple of things to note: the way this typically works, and is the fraudster will hack the email. They'll hack the system, get into the email, and they kind of monitor the email string and wait for the opportune time, which looks like what happened here. Another thing that was pointed out, and I talked to the banks, is that they will look at vacation schedules on these people. And if I remember right, Kristen was out for a couple days.
Yeah, just to clarify, Kristen Haar is the office manager of SDA, and Gordon is correct. She was out on a bereavement leave when all of this initiated. So.
Everybody's hearing a train go by. I apologize. Part of my office environment. Anyway, so we're not going to go through that, but they show some tips. basically be suspicious, and anytime I'm down here, when you look at the 6 tips, when there are changes, be suspicious, confirm with instructions with the appropriate contact, look for additional security, etc. So again, I'm not going to go through that. We'll look at that. Again, this is just commerce information on the second and third page, so you can read that. I'm not going to go through this detail. As far as the ACH, this is one thing that I was not aware of, how fast the rules are changing with NACHA. If you haven't heard the term NACHA, National Automated Clearinghouse Association, they make the rules for all the banks, and all the banks have to follow those rules. And what's happened over time, if you're familiar with ACH or have done them, historically, those transactions would take anywhere from 2 to 3 days to clear. It used to be, it used to be somewhat depending on Fed zone clearings, much like canceled checks, where a canceled check would go through your bank, and then it would go through the Fed zone, and then it would go to the second Fed zone, or the corresponding Fed zone, and then ultimately to the other bank. And sometimes that transactions, when you think about checks that you may have sent to, to what I'll call the East Coast or a different region, may have taken, somewhere between 4 and 5 days to clear. The technology is changing. Those checks are clearing faster. Sometimes checks will clear same day. But as to ACH, what used to be a typical 2-day lag can now be done in 2 hours, and that's dependent on cutoff times. There is a current limit on those, 250,000, and by and large, the banks are letting the initiating party control the timing of the transaction. So whoever's doing this has to be aware of how those things work. When a fraud is discovered, and that is reported to the bank, that matter is turned over to the bank fraud division. You can request an ACH reversal. There's a 24-hour time period when you can do that, but the banks don't guarantee anything. It all depends on how fast that transaction cleared and whether that money was moved out by the fraudster. So if you think about a situation where you do a 2-hour ACH payment, it clears into that other bank's account, that the fraudster will then initiate a wire transfer, and now those funds at that point are gone. And there's little, if any, chance of getting that back. The only, if they are able to freeze the account, what you don't know is how many other transactions might be affecting it. So the recovery of funds is one dependent on the correspondent bank. I was told that the larger banks, and PNC is one of those larger banks, are typically slow to respond, and sometimes they don't even respond. So they have so many of these, and they kind of take them in order, and I don't know, what who sets the rules in the bank. So, but my main point is that the industry has changed, and it's going to continue to change here, and it's going to move faster. So it's almost going to move in the case where it's almost like a wire transaction. Okay, you have on this page here, page 4, the pages are numbered at the bottom. So this is the sequence of events, and I just highlighted a few of the things. Darn it, my mouse is doing that, so I apologize. So you can see what happened over time in terms of the 13th, where it looks like this transaction started. The actual payment was made on the 18th. On the 18th. It was then identified as a problematic ACH or a fraudulent transaction the next day. And you can see the timing there, where the 1 p.m. the ACH was submitted, 4:05, which is past your typical 24-hour time period. The reversal request was submitted to Central. You can see that there was subsequently reported to the FBI. Steve contacted Michael Sapp. On the 25th, Steve talked to Phil Grubaugh. On the 30th, he spoke with John. And then you can see the last series of events leading or contacts leading up to the February Finance Committee meeting where this was discussed in closed session. So one of the things that I will get to later is just I think a protocol for reporting incidents like this, or getting the officers and the board notified of incidents like this. Because Steve, I think I'm correct in stating that we don't have a current policy for that. Is that correct?
I'm correct. We don't have a policy nor a track record. This was really our
Right,
first,
right.
our first incident. So,
While this looks like when we get back to this, looks sort of textbook like a case. Steve pointed out in Quan last week that they've had previous attempts to do this that they've caught. And so I can't tell you why this one wasn't. It's just where we are. So, okay, so giving you an idea of the forms, and just giving you kind of a broad base understanding of how these transactions work. This is the standard authorization form that MCPL would have the vendor fill out with their information. So looks pretty standard, straightforward. This is the actual 2019 form. By the way, I assume you can see the comments up there. If you're not, you should be able to click on those little comment boxes and that box will pop up. Same thing back here. So my comments start on this page here, and then I put them on each page, or most of the pages. Okay. So this is the original form. You can see, as Steve pointed out, the spelling error of authorization was actually the libraries. That was later corrected. So here's the form this is the form that it was actually in the email. I requested from Steve and got the email. So I opened this up. And the first thing I did was kind of click on these, and all of a sudden I see these boxes, okay? And I can do this. So I'm flipping to the next page here. So I have Adobe Standard. I don't know that Adobe Reader does this, but I tried it at home and it sort of looked the same. But these were all things that just looked like they got whited out. If you go back to this original form, again, I don't have any proof that they lifted this form. I can just tell you that between the spelling and the signature form, that's what it appears to be, okay? But all those boxes were just filled in, and even the signature. So, if you look at here, actually this one I can't move, but when I had it when I opened it originally, I could just move those boxes around, including the signature, okay? This is an invoice. I just put this there as an example. This is the invoice that was paid. Again, the signature down here, when I looked at it, that did not appear to be an original wet signature. It appeared to be a facsimile type signature that they just drop in for the purpose of invoicing. Again, I don't have any evidence of that. That's what it appears to be. Okay, the next page here is this. I requested for an email from Kristen, and if you look at that again, you'll see when we get back to the following pages where they changed the email by one letter and some other things. But this is her standard signature format. The other thing you will notice in here is that her writing style. All right, my English days are long ago, but I'm saying it's a fairly simple sentence structure she uses. She's very direct, very simple. When you get back, it's sort of, here's your invoice, please pay it. I'll just state it that way. But no flowery language. I just didn't see that, at least in these examples. So here is the compromised email. So the next 7 pages on your notes are the compromised email string. You'll see the email address. All right, I'm going to do that over here. You'll see that the email address, I've highlighted that. The font changes, the writing style, punctuation was one thing I just noticed right away. And then obviously the email signature format. So again, I'm not going to flip through every page and point them out. I just highlighted them for ease. You know, Kristen generally didn't use the word kindly and anything flowery in her writing. So you'll see punctuation. And again, you know, things I've already noted. So that was evident from one of the early emails. You know, sometimes I know this would be hard to catch, but again, when I think the takeaway on this is when something like this happens, you really want to just slow yourself down, take a breath, and look at the email and say, you know, is this really, is there something strange about this? Like I said, they've caught these in the past and this one wasn't. These last 2 pages are Kristen's actual email. Again, you can see her form of writing, which is fairly simple and direct in terms of structure. And again, the signature format. So that, you know, that's what transpired to the ACH being done. I think it was talked about the last meeting, and it's up in your notes where we didn't verify with Kristen via phone call that the change was appropriate. It could possibly have been verified with someone else. I don't know that. I don't know the company. So, okay. I'm going to move on to the next part here. The last 2 pages are some things. This page here, I asked Steve and Kwan for the existing policies and procedures, and I just extracted a couple paragraphs from you know, obviously larger documents. But I would note that in the guiding principles section, the way it's currently structured is that Steve's signature or approval is not required on anything under 100,000. Another thing I noticed on here is the wording of staff should not, and I'm not going to play attorney. Typically what I would see is something that's more exacting in terms of the policy structure, i.e., you know, staff is not authorized and has, you know, and the word should not would come into play, but it would say position, you know, staff is authorized up to some duration. That would be maybe a 1-year agreement. And it would also include some form of dollar limit, like they can approve some form of short-term lease up to a total aggregate cost of, say, $2,000. The piece here is with regard to the disbursements. Actually, this is checks, and this talks about the pre-check report, and this paragraph here talks about the ACH transaction, but it's sort of the same. And as I read it in conjunction with the piece up here talking about Steve's authority, Kwan would have authority for any disbursement up to 100,000. Okay, so that's what our existing structure looks like, and the same thing applies to ACH transactions. When I talk to the bank, one of the banks I work with requires, depending on the amount, and their stated amount is 25,000, they require a second level approval for those ACHs to go out the door. So they set their protocol up much like wires, even though the signature cards may not require it. But I think the banks are probably doing that because they spend too much time dealing with some of these fraudulent transactions, and the fraud attempts are, you know, as you well know, I'd say escalated. It'd be a mild description. Okay. What I put down below are just a couple examples of what I've seen, and this is in my experience, the types of procedures or policies you would have in place. So from the standpoint of approvals, this is a system-driven module here. Okay. In this case, the accounts payable department, once everything is approved, just makes payments. Okay. And checks are signed and ACHs are done, but there's an extremely tight protocol and system process that avoids accounts payable just paying a bill, right? So if things, if in this case, if the invoice isn't approved and doesn't get the appropriate approval levels, you can see this is a large company, but fairly low level. You know, low level approvals, and unlimited would be you know, would be a few, maybe 3 or 4 people in the entire company. Again, I don't know exactly who, but that's typically how that would be set up. Down at the bottom, I put in a sample check sign, and again, this is just for illustration only. But typically, when checks get over a certain amount, in some cases, you may require manual signatures. It forces that signing party to make sure that that check should be going out the door. And then, you know, depending on the structure of the entity, you get into where board approval is required. And again, it depends on the type of entity. So I point that out strictly for illustration and in comparison to what the current policies are. The last page is just the Missouri statute. We've talked about this at the last meeting. When it gets down into paragraph 3 here, I've asked Steve and Ron to get a legal opinion on this as to our direct compliance. I think that's in process. I don't know when we'll have that, but to some extent we have, you know, we have this as a first level policy that would feed back into and coordinate to what the internal policies of the library are. So a couple other things on this transaction, and I think I mentioned this. You know, at this point, if we don't have the funds, I would say it's probably unlikely we'll recover them. I can't say we won't recover something. Again, I don't know where PNC stands with the party, the party that or the fraudster that has that bank account. There may be multiple transactions and they've frozen the funds and there's time. So there may be some recovery, there may be none. Again, the FDA, there have been communications with them. I don't have the status on that. I'll ask Steve to comment. In terms of the insurance recovery and the policy, I've made some inquiries with brokers I work with, again, just on a what I'll call a generic basis. The response to them was file this under as many policies because there may be other insurance clauses in all your policies, and the policy language is going to determine which one takes, I guess I'll call the order of claims and claims payment. So it may not be the one you think. I talked about this the last time with what's going on in the industry. Again, I don't know I don't know the carriers in detail here or the broker, but this could have an impact on the renewal. I just tell you the industry is tightening the fences on this type of coverage, and it's because of these kinds of transactions. And you think of the thousands of cases they're dealing with and claims going out the door, or claims dollars going out the door. So I'm going to stop there and ask if there's any questions on this. If I went through this too fast, if you have any questions on the actual transaction itself. Okay, I proceed here. In terms of where this goes, and again, I am bringing this to the committee. I'd like some feedback, but I think given where the policies are, sorry for my mouse does things. I think this would be an appropriate time to take a look at the internal policies and procedures, not just the disbursements, but I guess the full transaction, what I call the full transaction channel and cycle. I mentioned the escalation procedures. Typically, you would want a policy that talks about, when you get into a situation like this, what is the protocol, so you're not having to call somebody and say, what do I do? So you just have a sequence of steps that would include notifying the officers, the appropriate officers, in this case, the treasurer, secondly, the president, and ultimately, how do you report this to the committee, the finance committee and the board as well. So I think those are things that we have to get in place. But in terms of the type of procedures up here, and again, I'm gonna defer this to when we get some clarification on the statute because that has to come into play. But there has to, I'd like to see something that is more structured, more formal in terms of how things are done and relative to the overall internal control structure. This is one area where you want that very well defined, and everybody knows what their authority limits are. The accounting department and the accounts payable also have very tight controls, and those people are ultimately accountable for maintaining the controls over money going out the door. So that's that may entail a separate project. I would recommend we look at bringing someone in from the outside to assist with that. Again, we're not creating a wheel here. I don't know the control structure, so I'm not going to be suggesting how that be written up. But we could bring in someone from the outside. One of the things, an obvious question is, should we look at our current auditors? And while we can talk about that, I think my preference and recommendation to the committee is we look at an independent third party so that your auditors are not auditing their own work. You want your auditors to be independent. As I've noted in discussions, the auditors do not play a role in our management structure. They cannot play a role, otherwise it impairs their independence. And if they're not independent, they cannot do the audit or should not do the audit. So we don't want to look at our auditors as being a part of that oversight process. That is the responsibility of the board, the officers, and the management of the company. So that's the approach I would recommend. There's a term you probably hear in a lot of places, but you want to get to what I'll call best practices. And again, somebody who does this frequently, who does this on a professional level can help us get there. I think that would be a short order. It probably would be what I'd call an agreed upon procedures engagement, to where we say, this is what we want you to do, and they fulfill that task and then they're done. But again, our auditors, our financial statement, our auditors would be auditing the results of that, obviously not this year, but down the road. So their view of that would be independent of the professional who helped design those. And any questions on that? Any comments on that? Thoughts? Again, this is not something I'm suggesting we do. I do think we need to take an immediate look at how we are doing things. Look at those limits, look at the wording, probably change it in very short order to make sure that there are no questions about who's authorized to do what and to what levels. I think that's something that probably should be done in what I'll call a very short-term basis. The rest of it can be done down the road after we get through the budget cycle.
Yeah, this is Ron. I just want to comment on my observations when this first came to my attention. I would strongly encourage that eventually the board will engage a third party to review the policies and procedures in place and any recommendations. And this comes from the notion that an auditor, even going way back when I was in public accounting, the outside auditors, the third party independent auditors, are to have an initial review of internal controls. And one thing that would immediately jump out, even to the junior auditors, would find, called precatory language like should or like to or something like that. It is really to be, it has no place in a procedure manual. So in as much as that was not apparently addressed in the management letter, I would strongly encourage that the board considers a a third party special examination of that element of the finances for the library. And frankly, as soon as reasonably able to be accomplished.
Other comments? Ron, is this, go ahead.
No, this is yummy. I'm just saying, yeah, that's sort of what I was gonna say, I think that's a great idea to bring in a third party and just to make sure the policies and procedures for something like this are very, like you said, written very, with no ambiguity. I do have another question in regards to the, I don't know if I don't want to take us off of this track, but after this, I want to ask another question in regards to the timeline. But I'll do that in a minute.
Well, let me ask you to, and again, I'm charting new territory here because I haven't been down this path with this group, but is that a recommendation we want to take to the board, Ron and Yummy, or others? Does that require a vote, or is that just a general consensus of the committee, and we'll present that to the board at the March meeting?
That could be easily inserted as an agenda item.
Pardon me?
That can be very easily inserted as an agenda item.
Okay.
Oh, and Gordon, this is Steve, just to clarify. Yeah, the committees have no independent authority at all. So
Okay.
if you're going to direct staff to do something, then this needs to come essentially as a recommendation from the committee and then voted on by the full board to direct staff.
Okay. Okay.
This is Brent. I hope people can hear me. I think it'd be helpful to have a fiscal note. You know, what does the potential cost of a third party outside engagement might be, so that we can understand that. So.
Other questions? Okay, so I will leave it, if I'm understanding correctly, I will leave it to Steve and to Ron to add this to the March meeting agenda, correct?
Well, so there's two ways to do this, Gordon. This is Steve. One way is to take this up as a vote and recommendation from the committee, at which point the committee could vote that this would come out. And that's what comes out in those committee reports where we say, you know, this was discussed and then this comes in the form of the motion from the committee. That's how that happens. The other way is for this just to be a discussion amongst the committee and then Ron to ask me to put it on the agenda essentially as a new business item. Our structure, our committee structure has always been to do this sort of labor, like what's gone on here, and then to gain consensus from the committee and make a recommendation to your peers as to what you would like to see happen. But that's what we've done in the past.
This is John Gordon, if I may. I think it's important that we know what the cost of this is going to be, how much time it will take, how many types of people are there that are in that marketplace that we would be soliciting. I think we should know that before we take it to the board. If any board member would want to know what is this going to cost, I think. And so I think we should know what it's going to cost before we take it to the board.
Yeah, and I guess I'm thinking more sequentially and getting the board to get the board's consensus or approval that we can proceed with evaluating what that cost is and then bring it back to the board. It would not be an authority to just go do it. It would be a board approval to proceed. If I don't need board approval to do that, I guess we can run that on a parallel track. But I guess again, I was thinking that we would want the board's approval to even proceed to get cost estimates and some some people identified.
Gordon, this is Steve. So just to verify what I'm hearing, and I think what I'm hearing is the way that we've done things in the past, if I'm thinking about other committees and other things that we've done. So we've had this discussion. There seems to be some feeling amongst some members of the committee that I'm hearing that there needs to be some additional investigation and some to figure out what the entire thing potentially looks like. This committee could instruct staff to continue to work on such a plan and start putting things together to bring that back next month with costs, scope, timelines, things like that. I mean, I have to confess, one thing that I am concerned about is what I see as a major process like this going on simultaneously at budget time, which is also a major process that's going on in the finance. I mean, I know we've got to walk and chew gum, but we have to figure out how to prioritize too. To
Yeah,
make sure
Steve,
we don't drop the ball. So
yeah, Steve, what I again go back to my previous comment. I would not consider doing this project until we get done with the budget cycle.
okay,
So,
fair enough. Fair enough.
I would push the.
Yeah.
So again, it's the if the consensus of the committee and we get the consensus of the board that this is how we want to proceed, then we have a few months to throw the fishing lines out or get some initial feedback that we can then present later on. I do not want to make this a priority. The only priority I would have is just what I call taking a few paragraphs and putting some precise wording in there. That's a few hours of work, not a few weeks or a few months. So Gordon, that's my recommendation.
Okay, so I see that more clearly. Thank you. And so then just to clarify, I think what I'm hearing in terms of making this larger plan, including fiscal note and all of that, that the committee can direct us to do that. In fact, I'm thinking about building committee. Building committee, we take a look at a piece of land. Building committee will say, go back and get a survey in a phase one. We go back, get the survey phase one. And then it's not until the committee is satisfied that we then bring the whole thing to the full board. And so, Quan and I can get to working on that. Quan and I also feel, he and I were sharing notes during the presentation. We also feel that, there's probably a couple of areas where we could firm up some ambiguity, but in general, we believe that the staff does understand their level of authority. It may not be clear to the board. I'll acknowledge that, but our staff do understand what they can do and what they can't do without coming to Quan, without coming to me, and we can definitely work on cleaning up some of that language, because you're right. It is not written the way it should be based on what you pointed out. So. Okay, got it. I think Joycelyn's got her finger up here. So
yeah. I just wanted to caution this committee to avoid doing Band-Aids to this process. Whenever a change is made, especially one having to do with authority, I think that we need to make sure that the policy is clear, that there are opportunities for training and there are opportunities for it to be well known and throughout the organization of what that means. I would encourage us to do our part to make sure that staff recognizes what changes are made and that those changes will be relatively permanent.
Yeah, this is Yummy. I think that's a good point, Joycelyn. I'm just wondering if in the interim, if there is something that could be done, I want to say almost like a Band-Aid. Just something that could be done like an additional training something along the lines of, some of the information that Gordon was sharing with us. Can there be like an extra training or something that would be more immediate?
Well, Joycelyn, I'm not quite sure I'm comprehending what you're telling me. I view this as I need to do something immediately because my current procedures are inadequate. Okay? As I said, I don't want to go down the path of a major project at this point of the year because the budget cycle takes priority. But here's the risk we have. Let's say that staff, I'm going to go up to that guiding principles paragraph. Let's say that staff does commit the library to a major expenditure and it goes beyond 1 year. And I'm not going to play attorney, but saying they should not do that is, I think, can be construed much differently than they don't have the authority. Okay. So I think the short term, I think this needs a short term fix. I think, as Steve just pointed out, staff operates at a detail level. We need to memorialize that in the notes, maybe change some of the thresholds, which is easy to do, and we get that in place. I think that's what needs to be done here. I would not defer this thing to a major project. Those are, like I said, one of these is a few hours work, and one is much larger. And as I said before, that entails some other policies and procedures as well.
My only comment was, I'm not saying nothing should be done. My only comment is saying that what should be done thoughtfully and with communicating all the way down the line, things that will be in place longer than just, well, for right now. I think it needs to be a deliberate process and thought process, because what we will be essentially doing is more, if you're talking about more than reinforcing what we already have in place, you're talking about retraining staff and then coming back and retraining staff. I would like to see that be an orderly process so that staff is clear about what is in place and what will be in place long term. I don't think that's unreasonable.
Joyce,
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Was that?
Yeah. Joyce, and this is Ron.
You
mentioned that the staff does understand, I think the words is what they should do. And I think it's unfair to the staff to have should do as a substitute for specific dollar amounts. And I think that can be, if there are dollar amounts in the understanding what they should do, that'd be very easy to establish in writing. And I think that would be an entirely appropriate immediate response. And then, of course, anything that's going to be more exhaustive, it can be undertaken later on. But I think there's I feel strongly that there's some immediate needs that are an opportunity for us to respond to in a way that would not be disruptive at all. And if in fact the staff is operating under an understanding, then all we do is we memorialize that and make sure everybody is aware of the fact that the understanding is now actually set in place.
Yes, I agree with that, Ron, and I think that I'm being a little misunderstood. I'm just saying that if we're going to come up with a dollar amount, that dollar amount should be what it will be. Not come back and then say, oh, this is going to be another dollar amount. I think careful consideration should be made so that staff isn't constantly subjected to changes, because that just opens up a whole nother Pandora's box of misunderstanding. I just think that if you're coming up with a dollar amount, it should be more than just a Band-Aid. It should be something the staff can expect to continue. That's all I'm saying.
Joyce Lennis Gordon, I'm going to respectfully disagree. And again, we have a material transaction here. We had a breach of what I'll call of the system, a breach of internal control. When I look at the treasurer's responsibilities and Quan is the CFO, there are two things there are two things that they have to do first. One is get the money in the door and secure it. And the other one is to make sure that the money going out the door goes to the right parties in the right amounts and to the right places. And we had a breach here. The typical reaction in this is to lock things down, and it is very normal to just come up with a short-term change to get control in place. That can and probably will change, okay? I would prefer we go to a tighter level initially and then say, you know, after evaluation, we made some changes. I don't view this as a typical policy and procedures process. I don't view this as something that can be interpreted. These are very precise, very exacting policies. You either authorized or you're not. You can approve something or you can't. There is no question, and there should be no question about who can do what. And I'm going to recommend the committee that we get some short-term changes in place. And if they are changed down the road, they are due to a better understanding of what we should be doing. But at this point, I need to put a lock on the fence and make sure this doesn't happen again.
I still think I'm being misunderstood, but I will respectfully accept your opinion on that.
Okay, all right. And yours as well. So Steve, I guess what's our and Ron.
Yeah. So,
let me do this. Is there any objection from the committee to the way I've described this? We don't need a formal. I'm not hearing we need a formal vote. The committee can do some. We can do some casual, what I'll call casual investigation and inquiries. And with the intent of doing something after the budget cycle is complete, but in the meantime we'll make some changes to these specific sections of the policies so that everybody is on the same page. Do I need a vote? Or can I just do it? John, is that you?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I just to bring this sort of to a head, I'd like to make a motion if I may.
I don't know if
yeah, you can.
we can vote.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, for direction.
Okay.
The motion would be to ask staff to look at the work that's been done so far that has identified some tightening that should be made on an immediate basis, and to make those changes and bring them back to the board at our next, bring them back to the committee at our next meeting so that we can see what changes have been made and review those. And secondly, I would like to, as a part of the motion, ask staff, and I think they have the capacity to do this quickly, to make an estimate of the cost of the longer term study, which would be done at a later time. But we should know the cost of that as soon as possible, it seems to me. So that's the motion. It has two parts. One is short term, one is longer term. And I would make that motion.
For a second.
Brent, I'll second it.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I have some questions. So would this include the wording as Gordon was saying? Do we need to make a recommendation to them to change the ambiguous wording? So I don't understand about that.
John, if I understood you correctly, that would be the part one of your motion, which is staff to make immediate changes, bring them to the next, what would be the April Finance Committee meeting for discussion. And then, again, I don't know if that's go to the board. Sorry, I got a train coming by again.
Yeah.
Hold on.
That you're correct. That would be included in my motion.
Okay, and then the second part is and again, I don't know, I think the estimate of cost is probably something we need some range so we can build that into the budget. But I don't know that we need a formal hard proposal by the next meeting. I don't know if we'll be able to get that.
Oh, no, I wasn't. That's not part of the motion. The part of the motion that is the longer range part is to ask staff to make the best estimate they can of the cost, and they'll take a little research on their part and bring it back to us at the next session so the committee is aware of it.
And to that point, I mean, what Gordon was saying in terms of budgeting, I mean, we'll want to put that in the professional services line for the upcoming budget. So yes, so what I've got, and Teresa, I'm not sure if you got something better, but basically what I've got is a motion for staff to make changes to solidify policies, procedures, and authorizations relative to our current situation and report them back to the committee. And to get a plan and cost for an audit going forward. And I'm sorry, that last part's a little ambiguous, but I think we know what we're talking about.
Yeah, at least I'm clear with what is.
Yes.
That wording is clear to me.
All clear to you, John? Okay,
Yes.
okay.
I picked up.
Clear to staff, we understand.
Okay, are we done with that item?
Just the vote.
Okay, yeah, I guess so. I'm sorry.
We have a motion and a second.
Just moving on to my next point. All those in favor of John's motion, I'm not going to restate it. Aye.
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 All opposed?
No.
Any abstains?
Yeah, that was me.
Okay, I guess we unanimous approval.
Thank you, and that's correct. And Gordon, just to clarify for people who are, Robert's rules and sunshine law, this is because the committees don't have any independent policy authority. This is really just getting the consensus of the committee to direct the staff. It's not really like a policy vote or a vote to purchase property or anything like that.
Correct.
So just want to clarify that point for everyone.
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay. So the only other question I have or had on my notes here is, do we need any disclosure of this? So we're on the front end of it, or how would you, what is the normal, is there a procedure for handling something like this?
Gordon, this is Steve. I mean, as I mentioned before, this is our first time. We don't really have a track record on something like this. So, this was discussed in public session today. Typically, the committees do report out public session items to the board in public session at the board, so we can do that. Are you recommending something more like press release or something like that? Or are you just talking about public information like at the board meeting?
Well, as opposed to having somebody backside to come in the backside and start making some assumptions, I guess if we don't say anything, we should at least have a prepared response when someone does ask the question, right? And something to the order of, action is being taken, and both short-term and long-term changes, so that they understand that we're not just sitting here and saying, it happened and we're not doing anything about it. So
yeah,
that's really kind of my view.
Yeah, point taken. And also just for the everyone else, so you can sleep good at night. I mean, the day after this happened, Quan and Brenda's responsible for most of our disbursements. Quan and Brenda and I got together, and we've already changed some of our procedures. So if you do an ACH today, it's different than it was in January in terms of how we do things. And so we've already changed, and I think tightened up a lot of our procedures going forward almost immediately. But to your point, Jim Staley is on the call. Jim handles all of our media contacts, and he heard what you said, and I'm sure that he will have a prepared statement like that in the event the Kansas City Business Journal or someone like that were to give us a call.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
Gordon, sorry, I have a question before if we're ready to move on from this topic. I have one more question before we do.
Go ahead.
And that is, I'd like to know more about what the FBI has discovered, if anything, what local police have discovered, if anything, what research, if any, has been done into the proper insurance to inquire about it. I heard your expression that, there are multiple types of insurance. We should explore them all. I certainly agree with that. So I just like to know if there have been any explorations, and if we have any sense at all of whether we have an insurance that will cover some of this. And I'd also like to hear if there have been any discussions with the SDA concerning their responsibility with this, and whether or not we should have some discussions with them, whether or not we've had any discussions with them about their responsibility and how they feel about that. As we look at recovering the money, as you pointed out, as treasurer, my main concern right now is getting the equivalent of the money back. And so I'd like to know more about what's being done to do that.
Steve?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that on. So let me start off with insurance, and then I'm going to pass the law enforcement over to Quan, because I think he's probably tracked that a little bit closer, as well as our conversations with Central Bank and what they've been doing. So, and I will also touch on SDA before I pass it over to Quan. So in terms of insurance, I spoke with Chris Dinelli. Those of you who know, Chris Dinelli's been responsible for our insurance for years. He says that there is a couple of different insurance policies that he feels will cover this without any, he's going to have no problem. He feels he'll have no problem filing the insurance and no pushback from our carriers. The biggest one is we actually do have a rider on our crimes policy for ACH fraud. So when somebody commits ACH fraud against the library, we are covered. The deductible for that is $1,000. The coverage is up to $100,000. He's, I believe, already talked with Quan. He's already talked with Brenda. He feels very confident about that particular line as a line of insurance, which was your question, John. There are a couple of other lines. I mean, in terms of, we've also talked about potential impact. He said it probably will have an impact on our renewal rate, but I believe our coverage for that insurance is $5,000. He said it won't even be double. There'll be some increase in our rate, but it will be very minimal, was what his feeling was. He also had a number of other pieces of advice and discussions to have, but that was where he was recommending that we look. Another thing that he was in terms of SDA, as you know, as you've seen in the timelines, I've talked with Michael Sapp about this on a couple of occasions. He's the president of SDA. We are continuing to have conversations about this and to try to figure out how SDA can best help out with this situation. And frankly, there's a couple of different paths. I'm just going to be completely honest. We're in an open session in a YouTube video. I don't want to put my negotiating cards out on the table when I'm going to be negotiating with Michael Sapp. Yeah. So I'm not going to go into much more detail, but I believe that there is some that there are some opportunities for us.
Well, and the facts are they were breached. Is that correct, Steve?
That is correct. He did it to me.
Am I correct? They did not notify us?
They did not notify us.
Okay.
Correct.
So just for comparison, and they're a private company operating under different rules. I got an email yesterday or the day before that Aon, who is one of the largest insurance brokers in the world, was breached. They put out a public release. And I don't know whether it was within days or hours or what, but they publicly acknowledged it. Their clients are aware of it. So anyway, it's just for comparison.
It is a good point. And when J.E. Dunn was breached a year or so ago, they also put out a public release and let all of their clients know about it. So Quan, in terms of law enforcement, what have we heard from FBI, Independence Police, and from Central Bank and OLA?
Nothing from Independence Police Department, but FBI office, local office followed up with us twice so far. Basically, they just kind of give us some tips and instructions about how to work with the bank to recover the money. With the central bank, the first attempt to reverse the ACH has been rejected by PNC Bank. Currently, they are working on second attempt, but unfortunately, there's no deadline for PNC to respond. Both banks' ACH departments are talking to each other.
And to clarify, as I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, but as I recall, the email you sent me said it was rejected because the account was frozen.
Yes, that was the reason PNC Bank giving to Central Bank.
Yes.
Right. That Steve just and I hit on this earlier. That's the natural reaction of once the fraud divisions are engaged at both banks, they lock it down. that doesn't mean there's any money.
Correct.
And
Correct.
anyway, so.
Correct. John, was that?
Okay, yeah, well, that answers my question. It seems like activity is underway to try to reclaim as much of that as we can by whatever means is lawful and available to us. So thank you. Appreciate that report.
Okay, are we done with that item?
Now, this is Yummy. I have another question.
Okay.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
regarding the timeline, the document that Steve sent, that's highlighted in yellow with some exactly what occurred. It just seems that there is some communication breakdown, especially with the Brenda receiving and phone call from the receptionist telling her everything is fine and to go ahead. Has that ever been reconciled?
No, it has not been reconciled in the respect that if there is another timeline that I'd be happy to share with you that is basically SDA's version of the same timeline. As you would suspect, I mean, our side of the story is we called someone and someone told us, go ahead with this. Now there can be arguments, and certainly Gordon and I have had conversations as to whether or not we should have accepted the word of who we refer to as a receptionist in this document. Keep in mind, SDA is a very small firm. Their receptionist is essentially their assistant office manager. But should we have accepted that? In hindsight, absolutely not. And certainly SDA's position is that's not what their person said. I mean, it's obviously the point of contention. So this is among some of those things that I want to talk with Michael Sapp, but don't want to get into much more detail because I'm negotiating.
Well, and Yami, just to respond to the purpose of looking at the immediate, going back to John's motion, the first part of his motion, we will make some immediate changes subject to, a longer term view. So this happened, okay, and it's kind of like somebody hits you across the head with a 2x4, and it's like, hey, I need to change. I need to do something differently. So I think staff, this is one of those wake up calls where the next time the radar is going to go up very quickly and very high, as it should when these type of things come up. So we can't change what happened. So I wish.
But I'm just saying this is somebody is maybe even lying here, and I don't know if the conversation is recording, but has been recorded. But that is a major thing that would have to be cleared up, because it possibly may not even be our insurance. Maybe if they've told us to do it, maybe this would be something that they would need to pay for.
I'm going to suggest we leave that to Steve's discussion about what we do with the transaction as far as the insurance. We're the ones that sent the money. It falls under our insurance. So their insurance would have no obligation to us for this transaction. So, but I think we need to table the discussion on how to deal with SDA and the finances.
Okay, well, my only point is that as long as someone is looking into that, because that to me looks like the major communication break.
Right. Agree. Any other comments? Okay, let's move to item number 7. Is there anyone here from the public?
We have no public that we're aware of. And Teresa, did you have any comments?
I don't have any public comments. I think Cody's trying to say.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna reshare the rest of the slides, Gordon, for the presentation, if that's all right.
Oh, yeah, so you can take me off, fine.
Yes, thank you.
But no.
Do I need to do anything, or you just, hold on, do I need to?
Nope, I got it.
You're gonna take care of it. All right, thank you. So.
Gordon, I do not have any public comments.
Okay.
Finance.
Then I'll move on to number 8, other business.
And Gordon, I actually just have 3 real quick things that actually these just came up. Well, one of them didn't just come up, but I just was reminded about it. That we, the first one, and this is just a reminder, at the March board meeting is the meeting where we always set the non-binding levy rate as required by Missouri statute. And that's required in Clay County and Jackson County, but we have to set it for the entire library district. And just a heads up on that, remember, it's non-binding. The precedent has always, or the practice has always been to set that at the voted ceiling. And then, of course, when the calculation comes in, it is what it's calculated as. This is really just more of a ministerial practice. So just a heads up on that. I did want everyone to know that at the last meeting, we had Michael Keenan here, and he talked about the merger between the two firms and all of that. We did get the updated auditor engagement letter that we did discuss at that time. Typically, it's been the practice of MCPL staff to sign off on these during the duration of the contract unless instructed not to do so. And so I was going to sign off on it, but if you want us to bring the engagement letter to the full board, or take it up as a vote or something, we can do that. Otherwise, we'll just follow the practice that I will sign it on behalf of the library district as a continuation of the existing contract. Steve, I'm going to go first, if that's okay. Sure. I know what the past is, given some of the discussion of the past few meetings. I would like to bring that to the board and just briefly walk through it so we can get everybody on the same page as to what the audit entails and the auditor's responsibility. And then, it's a simple motion to approve it and move on. Okay, yeah. So if we handle it that way, I would suggest, I would prefer you hold off signing. We can do that. We'd handle it the same way we handle like an easement or something like that, where we just bring it up, let people see it, and then authorization to sign or not sign. So, okay. I can manage it that way. Last thing that I had is that just today I got a request from Helix to assign a 179D energy savings to our design team. The board did this in 2020, so we've done this before. And what it does is it permits a tax-supported and not-for-profit institutions to assign this tax benefit to a tax-paying designer of the systems that we're using to get the energy savings. Like I said, we did it in 2020. I just got the request, and I was going to add it as a new business item, and hopefully just like we did in 2020. But we actually, some of you may or may not remember this. I actually distinctly remember doing this from my basement during the board meeting, explaining what this was and how it worked, and all the meetings that I had with all the different tax people to make sure that it was all legal and all of that. So it really is just just revisiting that same thing again. But I just wanted to give everyone a heads up. I was going to add that to the agenda and bring that forward. So, and that's it. Those are my comments. I just wanted to got a little bit of direction, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Are there any other comments on those three items, the non-binding levy, the auditor letter, and this Helix tax savings matter? Okay. If there's no other business, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So move, John.
Second, Joyce. Thank you.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.